Are you surprised by Kiper's picks?
No, I'm not surprised. I had 3 of Teddy Bridgewater's game, and I'll admit I didn't know a whole lot about him before I had those games. But he's extremely impressive. I mean, he's certainly got the NFL size, 6'3", about 220. The most impressive part about him, other than his maturity and demeanor, film study, work ethic. He has mastered, one of the quarterbacks that he looks up to is Peyton Manning. So he's mastered the dummy call game. And the coaches, they put in an extraordinary amount of the play calling and the adjustments on Teddy Bridgewater in game. I mean, he's unlike a lot of quarterbacks, young quarterbacks out here in college who are only forced to maybe deal with a quarter of the field. I know that was one of the criticisms of E.J. Manuel, is that he's only really having to see half the field. Teddy Bridgewater's got the whole field, and he's able to make calls to the wide receiver when he sees one-on-one matchup. And he's in the NFL system. I mean, he's in the West Coast system. So a lot of the things he'd be asked to do at the next level, he excels. 68% completion rate. He had 27 touchdowns, only 8 picks. So he's got the decision making. He has every single tool. So it's completely justified that he would be the first quarterback to be rated on the big, and not Johnny Manziel. I think he's shown more, proven more, and they're not the questions about how his game would adapt to the pros.
Stephen A.
Listen, I'm going to, Jamel's covering college football. I certainly did it this year. Skip watches it religiously. I'll give him credit for that, and I'll defer to both of them. But just from my eyes, I saw him 2 games this year. He won both. Cincinnati and Temple. What do you want, a cookie? I mean, I'm just not sold. I mean, what am I supposed to? What am I supposed to?
Game though at the time though,
yeah,
Stephen A.
I get it, 34-31, and you got to remember, I covered, for those that don't know, Skip, remember before I was covering the NBA, I covered Temple football for 3 years. I'm still recovering from the depression that I suffered from having to watch them every week for 3 years. But let me say this though. I look at him and I get it. 3,718 yards passing, 27 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, completed about 68% of the passes. I get it. I understand it. But I'm a big dude on schedule. Sugar Bowl victory against Florida, okay. But then as I look, Kentucky, Missouri State, North Carolina, FIU, Southern Mississippi, Pittsburgh, South Florida. I already brought up Cincinnati and Temple, Syracuse, Connecticut, and Rutgers. Am I really learning something about this guy? I know his size. I know they talk about he's in the film room and he studied. I'm not trying to knock him. But when I think about what Johnny Manziel has done as a Heisman winner and going to Tuscaloosa and beating Alabama and some of the teams they played against, and then I watch this and I see this, I'm like, really? I don't know.
All right.
I don't know.
I watched Teddy Bridgewater 3 times last year, and 2 of them were your games when you were the sideline reporter. I watched at Syracuse. I watched Cincinnati, which I believe was at Louisville on a Friday night?
Yep.
And I watched the bowl game against Florida. He was pretty good against Florida. Bottom line takeaway, and again, maybe I don't have enough body of evidence here, but I'm pretty good on my initial gut feelings, my eye test. I think he's better than Geno.
I was totally going to say that. Completely going to say that.
That's the best thing I can say. Will he be a star at the next level? I'm not seeing that yet. Maybe I'll see more this time around. Maybe I'll see less from Johnny Football. But I wrote this for ESPN.com last week. Johnny Football is rare. Johnny Football is going to be a star at the next level. I'm not surprised Mel has him at 25. I talked to Mel about it last week ahead of the draft before I wrote my piece for .com. And Mel said, I just haven't seen enough. I need to see another revolution here. Let's see what happens this time around. Will the SEC figure him out? And how will he measure? I think he's going to measure closer to 6'1" than to 6 feet. I think he will end up being 6'1". He has huge hands and huge feet, and I'm told he is still growing, and that he'll grow into his hands and feet. My only number I want to give you on Johnny Football is that in 2 fewer games than Cam Newton set the SEC total offense record, This kid shattered Cam's total offense record, 2 fewer games in the Southeastern Conference. That's not easy to do. And to go to Tuscaloosa and beat a Saban defense as handily and soundly as he beat it, and I talked to his coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury, now the head coach, obviously, at Texas Tech, and Cliff's been around. Cliff set a bunch of NCAA passing records himself at Texas Tech and bounced around the NFL for a while. He said, I've seen my share of arms. This kid made 3 late throws against the Alabama defense in Tuscaloosa that were as good as I have ever seen. And one of them, he went right after D. Milliner, who would 9th pick in the draft to the New York Jets. Went right over his head with a corner route, hit that kid right in stride with a beautiful rainbow, and that was ball game for Alabama at home. He makes plays. He's got some Flutie and Tarkenton behind the line of scrimmage, and I'm not saying he's as fast as Michael Vick, but he's in the ballpark with Vick downfield. He can make you miss like crazy. He made fools out of my Oklahoma Sooners in the Cotton Bowl game. They couldn't catch him. They couldn't touch him. He can go 80, and he can throw at 80 on you.
And certainly anything that I said about Teddy Bridgewater, I don't want people to interpret as a knock against Johnny Manziel, as if I'm saying he can't do those things like Mel Kiper. I also need to see more. And a lot of times we get caught up in the dazzling elements. Obviously, Johnny Manziel is an incredible athlete. He can make plays on the run. The way that he just thinks so quick on his feet is certainly a trait that you need at the next level. But I think there is also something to be said with consistency, and there's certainly something to be said about the cerebral part of the game. And that is the most, I know that people talk about Teddy Bridgewater's arm strength, but the most impressive part of his game is his intellect. I mean, to see him, how he's mastered this dummy call system, you have no idea, if you're the defense, what he's doing, because he understands how to move safeties with his eyes, which is also the biggest part about transitioning into the NFL. He has a lot of those sort of mental aspects of the game down pat, which is what people lauded Andrew Luck for. He has those same qualities.
Stephen A.?
Well, the only question that I would ask, and it's just a question because I don't know. I just looked at some of the stats. You got a guy like Devontae Parker as their leading receiver, but the ball was spread around pretty judiciously. It's not like you had 1 or 2 key guys to throw it to. Now, it all comes down to how you think about those things. To me, it's much harder to defend against a quarterback when you don't know where he's going because you don't have a definitive go-to guy or 1 or 2 of those guys. Some people might look at it as that being a disadvantage for the quarterback. I look at that being an advantage because if you don't know what direction they're going to go in, if you don't know who their mark is, I think that helps them by and large. And I looked at some of the stats for Louisville and their offense. Don't have a 1,000-yard rusher, don't have a 1,000-yard receiver. They spread the ball pretty judiciously. Do you guys factor that into the equation at all as an advantage for Bridgewater in this discussion?
I think what it speaks to is honestly how he's able to exploit matchups. That's what he's good at. He surveys the field. He says, okay, I see my guy can beat that guy on the outside. I'm going to go there. He does spread it around the field, partly because he's in the West Coast offense. And, you know, to your point, Stephen A., you mentioned the competition. We can't overlook the fact it also helps that he went to Miami Northwestern. He's got several of his teammates that are on the same team. So there's a comfort level, including one of his leading wide receivers. So there's a comfort level there for him that obviously he's not going to get in the NFL. But competition aside, I mean, you can only play who's on your schedule. I think this kid is going to be a lot better. And I'm with Skip. He is better to me than Geno Smith. Wow. Absolutely. And so if people consider him a top 5 pick, what does that say about Teddy Bridgewater?
Well said. Bottom line on Johnny Manziel, I will predict he will become the most polarizing pre-draft figure since Tebow was before his draft.
I completely agree.
And I'm on record. Any team needing a quarterback that passes Johnny Manziel next year will make a huge mistake.
I think that, especially now that we see how Johnny Manziel is a social guy.
Yeah.
And he's living his life in the limelight, you know.
He belongs in pro football, not college.
I fully anticipate when it's time to draft him, we're going to all of a sudden start hearing all these stories about what his character may or may not be like.
Well, you called that a long time ago.
I said, well, he's got some Broadway Joe in him.
No question.
A nice
Never met a camera
dose, a healthy dose of
no, a dangerous dose.
A dangerous dose.
Thank you. Thank
Yikes.
you.